The diplomatic standoff over the war in Ukraine has entered a new, more rigid phase as Moscow increasingly frames its peace terms not as a negotiation but as a stark choice for Kyiv: total capitulation on core aspects of sovereignty or continued conflict. Russian officials, from the highest levels of the Kremlin to its diplomatic corps, are propagating a narrative that Ukraine has essentially forfeited its right as a fully independent nation through its alignment with the West and its pursuit of NATO membership. This position, consistently articulate in state media and in communications with other nations, posits that the only path to restoring a semblance of Ukrainian statehood is through the unconditional acceptance of disarmament and permanent neutrality. This framing effectively denies Ukraine's agency and its right to self-determination, presenting its future as something to be dictated by Moscow's security imperatives. According to this Russian worldview, Ukraine's post-Maidan trajectory, which saw it deepen political and military ties with the United States and Europe, was a betrayal of its historical and cultural ties to Russia, thereby negating its claims to unconstrained sovereignty. This perspective is frequently echoed by figures like Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, who has often used inflammatory language to question the very legitimacy of the modern Ukrainian state, suggesting it is an artificial construct that can only exist peacefully as a vessel of Russia. This line of reasoning underpins the entire Russian negotiating strategy, which is less about finding a middle ground and more about compelling Kyiv to acknowledge what Moscow sees as the geopolitical reality, that its security concerns supersede Ukraine's sovereign right. The message being sent to President Zelensky's government is clear and uncompromising, that continued defiance and reliance on Western support will only lead to further destruction and the potential erasure of Ukrainian from the map, while submission to Russia's demand is the only avenue to preserve some form of a Ukrainian state. The demand for complete demilitarization lies at the heart of this Russian ultimatum. Moscow's definition of demilitarization is far more extensive than a simple reduction in troop numbers. It entails the wholesale dismantling of Ukraine's defensive capabilities, a process designed to render the country permanently incapable of resisting Russian influence or military action in the future. The term laid out by Russian negotiators call for the removal and destruction of all advanced weaponry supplied by Western nations, including the long-range artillery system, air defense batteries, and armored vehicles that have been crucial to Ukraine's ability to defend its territory. Furthermore, Moscow demands a legally binding prohibition on Ukraine ever again acquiring such weapons from foreign sources. This would effectively cut off Kyiv's access to modern military technology and leave it with a force capable only of minimal internal policing. The United States Department of Defense, now under the leadership of Secretary Peter Hegseth, views this as a non-starter, as it would create a permanent power vacuum and invite future aggression. The Russian demands also extend to Ukraine's domestic arms industry, requiring the closure of factories and design bureaus involved in the productions of military hardware. From the Kremlin's perspective, this is a necessary step to eliminate what President Putin has termed the anti-Russia project on its border, ensuring that Ukraine can never again pose a military threat. This is presented as a prerequisite for peace, with the argument that a heavily armed Ukraine, backed by the West, will always be a source of instability and a potential launchpad for NATO aggression against Russia. For Kyiv, however, this amounts to a forced surrender of its most fundamental right, the right to self-defense enshrined in the United Nations Charter. Agreeing to such term would leave Ukraine entirely at the mercy of its larger neighbor, with no ability to deter or repel an attack, a situation that Ukrainian officials have repeatedly stated is worse than continuing the war. Complementing the demand for demilitarization is the equally rigid insistence on Ukraine's permanent, constitutionally enshrined neutrality. As with demilitarization, Moscow's concept of neutrality is maximalist. It is not simply a pledge to refrain from joining the NATO alliance. It is a demand for complete geopolitical reorientation away from the West and a return to what the Kremlin considers Ukraine's natural place within the Russian sphere of influence. This would require Kyiv to sever its strategic partnership agreement with the United States and the European Union, and to withdraw its applications for membership in both NATO and the EU. Russian diplomats have made it clear that any security guarantees Ukraine might receive from Western powers would be unacceptable, as they would violate this principle of neutrality. Instead, Moscow envisioned a future where Ukraine's security is guaranteed primarily by Russia itself, a proposal that Kyiv and its partner view as utterly unattainable. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's office has been actively working with European counterparts to counter this narrative, emphasizing that a sovereign nation must have the freedom to choose its own alliance and that neutrality imposed by an external aggressor is not neutrality at all, but subjugation. The Kremlin, however, presents this as a benevolent offer, a chance for Ukraine to find stability by accepting its geographical and historical destiny. Russian state-controlled media frequently promotes the idea that a neutral Ukraine would be free from the manipulation of outside powers and could prosper through renewed economic ties with Russia. This vision ignores the reality of the ongoing invasion and frames the conflict as a result of Ukraine's own misguided choice. Rather than Russia's aggression, the combined demands for disarmament and neutrality are therefore presented as a single, indivisible package. In Moscow's eyes, Ukraine cannot be neutral if it is armed by the West, and it cannot be trusted with arms if it is not permanently neutral. This interlocking logic creates a diplomatic dead end, as it requires Ukraine to preemptively surrender its sovereignty and security as a price for even beginning a conversation about ending the war. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, and so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to World Global Conflict, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first ones on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build the show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.